Sorry? No, I have my notes. I have this. No. Maybe you can do it with the microphone. Shall we start? So good morning, good afternoon, in this final day of COP, and it's really great to have this session. It's a very important session around grounding, around regenerative agriculture and agroecological approach to address food security and climate change, from evidence to action. And it's very important because during these 2 days, well, first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Carlo Fadda. I work for the CGIAR at the Alliance of Biodiversity International in SIAT. I'm leading a group on biodiversity for food and agriculture and an initiative on nature-positive agriculture. So this topic is very much at my interest and the core of what I do. And it has been a hot topic throughout this COP. We had so many events on regenerative agriculture, so many events on agroecology, so many, even if maybe to some the final conclusion of this COP is disappointing in terms of commitment, but still there is a recognition that food system needs to be transformed and needs to be a big solution to the to the climate crisis. But we also learned throughout this process that we don't know exactly how to do that. There are still uncertainties and there are still challenges for implementation. And so having a final session today on addressing the grounding part, understanding the evidence to action, it's really useful and it's very, very important. So this session will be structured. There will be 2 fire starter presentations. The first one from Oliver Oliveros, who is the coordinator of Agroecological Coalition, and the other one from Tex Sakota from CIMIT. And this will be followed by a panel discussion, which will be, and the video, which will be introduced later, but it's a very diverse set of people participating in the panel discussion and bringing very different perspective. And finally, there will be time for Q&A for the public to have clarification and to go a little bit deeper on the topic. Now, in the interest of time, I would like to ask Oliver to come and to make his presentation for introducing the topic and setting the ground. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Carlo, and welcome to you all into this session, which we always call like the COP28 survivors. It's a marathon. This is the last, the last mile, and it's always, a challenge to make sure that we're able to attract people in these types of events. But I think it's important to end where we should start, right? I think it's important to do that and to ground the conversations around the future of the planet, of our climate, and our food systems. You all know this. The current food systems are not sustainable. Producing 1/3 of our greenhouse gas emissions are from the current food systems, responsible for 80% of biodiversity losses, polluting the soil, air, and water, vulnerable to climate change. They do not address the triple crisis of malnutrition and maintaining social inequity and the loss of cultural values. This last bullet we always tend to forget, right? This is the part that in all these conversations we tend to marginalize, to set aside and take for granted. And all of these are directly attributed to and associated with the current food systems, which is based on organic agriculture, on industrial agriculture. And it's always hard to shift from this to something that is more sustainable, equitable, and resilient, because there's so many lock-ins that is blocking, and it's hinders us from doing so, from feeding the world narrative to compartmentalized thinking to a path of dependency, the different measures of success, which is mainly on production side. And all of this are basically anchored on the concentration of power, of corporates, of those who control the system. And so we need transformational change, something that is more profound and deep, no less than major global policy and scientific documents, from IPBS to IPES Food to the EU study on soils to IPCC IPCC report. All of this mention agroecology as a pathway towards food systems transformation, because it offers a different paradigm. It is offering a different paradigm, moving beyond what we often see as a quick fix solution. It is a trilogy of science. It is a practice, but it is also a social movement. And it actually started as a social movement in the Americas. And this is where we see the holistic and integrative nature of agroecology, because it really tries to address the entire food systems from production to consumption. Again, this part around the consumption is something that is also we tend to forget. When we talk about agroecology and regenerative approaches, our focus has almost always been on the production side, forgetting that if we want to shift, we really need to create demand and really need to make sure that consumers and eaters like you and me are able to demand for food that are produced in a way that is safe, in a way that is fair, in a way that is equitable, and a way that is resilient. And we won't be able to shift our system if we don't address the consumers ultimately, right? And agroecology takes all forms of innovations that are compatible with the 13 principles, which are combined with what is traditional and what is farmer knowledge. And I may add, and I should have added here, Indigenous. It is changing and challenging social relations, empowering farmers, adding value locally and privileging short value chains that links consumers to producers. And as I've mentioned, it is holistic and integrated because it really tries to address in the same, simultaneously, various objectives from economic, environmental, climate, health, cultural, social. And obviously it aims to achieve the sustainable development goals in an integrated manner. And all of these are guided and anchored on the principles. And agroecology is grounded on these 13 principles, which was developed by the high-level panel of experts within the Committee on Food Security, which is fully aligned with FAO's 10 elements of agroecology, which was approved and adopted by its 197 member states. So you could see here the different principles which are there, from improving resource efficiency, guided by the principles of recycling and reducing the use of inputs, by strengthening resilience based on the principles of soil health, animal health, biodiversity, synergy, and economic diversification. And then a set of principles that are really looking at securing social equity and responsibility, co-creation of knowledge, social values and diets, fairness, connectivity, resource governance, and participation. Obviously, these principles apply to all forms of agroecology, not just on land-based agriculture, but also those that are on pastoralism, on aquaculture and fisheries, and agroforestry and whatnot. These principles should be taken all together, as these are inherently integrated and synergistic and offer pathways that generate multiple benefits. It greatly enhances agricultural biodiversity and its multiple benefits, promoting social justice, recognizes and uplifts indigenous peoples, the knowledge and practices, nurturing local identity and culture. Our common future depends on the future of our commons. We come together in solidarity and as part of a collective responsibility to make sure that we're moving towards the right direction. And I think, as we have seen today during the COP28 conversations, we really cannot disassociate conversations from climate, with food systems, with fossil fuels, with biodiversity, with land, with justice and equity, and ultimately peace. At this moment where we see in some parts of the world, people are struggling with conflicts, etc. We can't help but not to associate all these conversations all together. So I'd like to invite all of us today to ground our conversations around agroecology and regenerative agriculture on these sets of principles, because principles lead the way. It is probably the only thing that cannot be rubbed or rubbed against us, right? These principles. And if we are all principles driven, and if all our actions are driven by values, there's no other way but to go towards the right direction. Let me stop there and hand over the floor to the next speaker, to you, Tech. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think you raise a very important point about consumption and about the fact that this regenerative agroecological approach needs to be viable for the communities. Tech from CIMIT, you will present a presentation on why regenerative agriculture and agroecological approaches, what is known, and the research priority. So you ground more on the research.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks, Carlo. And thank you, Oliver, for setting the ground, presenting the principle of agroecology. And with that, I can jump directly into why agroecological approaches and regenerative agriculture is important in the present context, and what are the evidences out there from the research and development activities, and what should be the priority going forward. So, agroecological principles are, agroecological approaches and regenerative agriculture are the ways to restore the natural ecosystem and natural resources and growing food in harmony with nature. And by doing that, these approaches try to create and address the climate crisis, both from climate adaptation as well as mitigation. And these approaches do, try to address both climate adaptation and mitigation, because these approaches try to improve the resources use efficiency. And these are the approaches that try to produce by utilizing more of the natural resources and try to substitute the external input. And these are the approaches to create synergy among food production, climate adaptation, and mitigation goal. And here in this slide, I want to just highlight the glimpse of our hub approach, what we also call is a learning landscape, which involves a researcher and development practitioners working closely with farming communities, with private sector partners and civil society organizations together in order to explore what are the production resources out there, what are the stressors, climatic and non-climatic stressors for food production and food chain, and what are the existing food system, and by under that circumstances to co-create together with them and test and validate a range of technological practices, regenerative practices and agroecological approaches to address food security, climate adaptation and mitigation goal. I'm not going to go in detail, but this is kind of testing in some places and then scaling it into the wider scale. And what evidences are out there? So there has been a lot of technology, regenerative technologies and agroecological practices or agroecological approaches that has been tested and validated under different production system. And these are just some examples. Please note that this is not an exhaustive list. These are just some of the examples, and there are many like this. And some of these examples are like optimization of cropping system diversification by including legume and other crops in the system that recycle the nutrient, conservation agriculture with the principle of minimum tillage, permanent soil cover, and appropriate crop rotation, precision nutrient and water management, and so on. Here today I'm going to give you the evidence from the three different regenerative practices, one on conservation agriculture, one on cropping system diversification, and third one on nutrient management, how they contribute to food security, climate adaptation, and mitigation goal as a climate smart agriculture. The figure on the very left, you can see that that shows how conservation agriculture with the principle of minimum tillage or no tillage, permanent soil cover, and appropriate crop rotation can increase the carbon sequestration as compared to the conventional way of production. And in the figure in the middle over there shows that it not only increases carbon sequestration or carbon content in the soil, but it also increases yield and farmers' income and improve the water use efficiency of the production system. Whereas the figure on the right side on this slide, it shows that when cropping system diversification is combined with conservation agriculture, those kind of benefit in terms of yield, in terms of income, and in terms of resources use efficiency, including use of energy and water into the production system, is much more resources use is maximized, yield is maximized, income is maximized, and energy use is minimized. So that's that kind of benefit that you can get by diversifying the production system. This one over here, I just wanted to highlight the evidence of nutrient management, for example, site-specific nutrient management. In this example, for example, we tested a decision support system called Nutrient Expert, which is a nutrient recommendation software decision support system that can recommend nutrient for farmers' production condition in the absence of soil testing facility or soil testing result, for example. And we evaluated that Nutrient Expert across the rice and wheat production system in Indo-Gangetic Plain in India on their performance in terms of production, in terms of fertilizer use, and in terms of greenhouse gas emission, and so on. And from there, what we found is, Nutrient Expert, this simple tool, can increase the yield by, it can, with less fertilizer consumption, that will obviously translate into less greenhouse gas emission. And this simple tool, if adopted into all the rice wheat system across India, that will translate into 14 million ton extra grain of rice and wheat with 1.4 million ton less nitrogen consumption. And that translates into greenhouse gas emission reduction by about 5.4 million ton CO2 equivalent. And how much is that figure? Let me put that also in perspective. That is equivalent to keeping about 10 million passenger cars off the road per year. This simple tool, if adopted into the rice wheat system in India. So these are some of the examples, and what should be the priorities? As a priority for future, as the science keep on developing, so we need to continue our efforts to do cutting-edge science and innovations around agroecological approach and regenerative agriculture. That's the need. But as I already said, that there has been a lot of technologies and approaches that has been already tested, validated, and proven to be effective. Now we should also prioritize scaling those and taking it to the scale by means of data sharing, knowledge sharing, partnership, and investing in data infrastructure, for example, and harnessing the capability of digital tools, decision support system, and techniques, and improving the financial investment in this area, and linking those technologies with market by means of carbon credit market, or by means of payment of ecosystem service, or by bringing in private sector to invest as by means of responsible sourcing or corporate social responsibilities, and so on. With that, I will stop here, and then I would be happy to take questions also during the panel discussion. Thank you.
Big round of applause. Thank you so much for these inputs. I would like now to introduce the panel, but before the panel joins us in the chairs, we will have a video. So we would like to introduce the first panelist is Tech. He is the leader of the climate change science group at the International and Wheat Improvement Center, CMIT, and is also a member of the Climate Investment Committee of the CGIAR. But please stay on, because we showed the video first. And maybe for all panelists, as you come to the front, I'm not going to make a big bio. I think it would be nice as you answer the question to take 30 minutes to introduce yourself, your organization, and your work, because I think you are better suited for that. Monica Yator, she's she's a strong activist in interlinked topics on climate change, gender equality, social inclusion, and indigenous people rights. It's great to have you here to bring that dimension of social movement and really complement on the important aspect of how that knowledge and different knowledge system need to be accounted for in agroecological and regenerative approaches. Oliver, you already hear from you. You are the coordinator of the Agroecological Coalition and the head of the Coalition Secretariat, which derived from the UN Food System Summit process. Grazia Kar, she's from India, and she belongs to Meghalaya and the indigenous people of Jaintia and Karbi in northeastern India, associated to NESFAS, the Northeast Society for Agroecology support. So once again, a testimony of the importance of groundwork. But before you take your position on the chair, we have a short video from the Ministry of Agrarian Development and Family Agriculture from Brazil, and he will set a little bit the tone from the political side, political point of view. And so let's, unfortunately could not be here in person, but he agreed to register this video.
Olá, amigos da Coalizão da Agroecologia. Meu nome é Moisés Savian, eu estou secretário de Governança Fundiária, Desenvolvimento Territorial e Socioambiental no Ministério do Desenvolvimento Agrário e Agricultura Familiar. O nosso ministério é o responsável no Brasil por atender a maior parte dos agricultores, que são os agricultores familiares, povos indígenas, comunidades tradicionais, entre outros públicos que são da agricultura familiar. A agroecologia sempre foi para nós um tema central e importante da agenda do presidente Lula e também da presidenta Dilma. No entanto, nos últimos 6 anos, especialmente, nós tivemos um processo de descontinuidade. O nosso ministério foi extinto, ele foi extinto, e agora, no governo Lula, ele foi recriado. Então, essas políticas, elas foram enfraquecidas e muitas delas paralisadas nos últimos 6 anos. Com a retomada do governo, retomam-se também essas políticas. O Brasil tem uma política nacional de agroecologia e produção orgânica que é pensada por uma comissão nacional que envolve os atores governamentais, mas também os atores não governamentais. Então, no Brasil existem dois conselhos, um de governo, onde se organiza a política pública, e outro com a participação social, onde se discute as diretrizes e se orienta o trabalho do governo. Então, o nosso esforço inicial é de reconstruir a política pública nacional de agroecologia e produção orgânica no Brasil. Mas quais são as políticas públicas que o Brasil promove para a agenda de agroecologia? Eu vou destacar 2 que eu considero as mais relevantes. Uma delas é a agenda de assistência técnica e extensão rural. O novo governo, o governo Lula, decidiu que toda a agenda, todo o recurso aplicado de assistência técnica e extensão rural será para a atividade agroecológica. Então, nós temos hoje no Brasil uma agência chamada Agência Nacional de Assistência Técnica e Extensão Rural, a ANATER, que é quem promove a assistência técnica, e essa agência, então, recebendo os recursos do MDA, todas as chamadas públicas que ela realiza para contratar extensionistas e disponibilizar no campo são chamadas voltada para a agroecologia. Nós já tivemos chamadas, a primeira chamada lançada foi uma chamada para o trabalho das mulheres agricultoras. Vai ter mais uma agora sobre florestas produtivas, que engloba produção florestal e sistemas agroflorestais. Uma segunda política é a política de crédito rural, ou crédito agrícola. O Brasil ele tem uma trajetória histórica de oferecer crédito agrícola aos agricultores brasileiros em taxas de juro bastante atrativas. Né? Para as linhas de agroecologia, produção sustentável, né? Ou mesmo a linha de florestas, essas taxas de juros, nesse ano, elas são as menores que o governo está oferecendo. Né? Então, elas variam de 3% a 5% de juros ao ano. Né? Então, esses são estímulos que o governo brasileiro dá, né, para se promover a agroecologia. Com relação ainda à assistência técnica e extensão rural, é importante destacar que parte do componente vem para a formação dos extensionistas, né, das pessoas que vão a campo prestar essa assistência técnica. E essa formação, ela vem da universidade, do conhecimento universitário, né? O Brasil tem uma grande rede de universidades públicas, institutos de pesquisa federais, que é onde se promove esse conhecimento, mas também a nossa tradição, né, é de valorizar os conhecimentos tradicionais, de valorizar os conhecimentos indígenas, o conhecimento dos agricultores. Então, a gente tem buscado cada vez mais buscar o conhecimento tradicional e também o conhecimento técnico para promover a extensão rural. Por isso, a necessidade de também se formar os extensionistas. Sobre aquilo que nos faz acreditar que nós vamos ter uma agricultura mais resiliente, de base agroecológica, eu gostaria de destacar 2 elementos. Um deles é que cada vez mais as mudanças climáticas estão mudando as suas caras, está dando a sua cara. Né? São nos eventos extremos, na mudança do regime de chuvas. Então vai ser uma necessidade se consolidar sistemas produtivos sustentáveis e resilientes. E a agroecologia, enquanto uma ciência, uma prática, ela demonstra ter a capacidade de ter os instrumentos para fazer essa agricultura resiliente. Esse é um elemento. Um segundo, né, é a questão mesmo da demanda maior por alimentos saudáveis, da demanda maior por alimentos sustentáveis, pelo crescimento da conscientização dos consumidores. Então, essas duas ideias força nos animam, né, a pensar. E no nosso caso do Brasil, o que nos anima também, né, é a possibilidade concreta e real de, no nosso governo, no governo Lula, poder fazer com que essa agenda avance. Né? São mais 3 anos de trabalho. O Brasil será a COP, né, daqui a 2 anos. Queremos ver vocês, conhecer vocês pessoalmente também no Brasil e, quem sabe, antes disso, né? Fica aqui já o convite. Então, isso nos anima e nos dá esperança. Bom evento para vocês, né? Muito importante essas parcerias, essa relação que a gente estabelece, né, nesse grande movimento mundial da agroecologia. Esperamos nos ver em breve. Contem com o Brasil nesse avanço da agroecologia. Um grande abraço.
So I think that was very inspiring in the sense that it really shows how things can go wrong. He mentioned that the ministry was abolished and then was created again, but of course all of this is waste of time. It means it delays things. So to reflect on his words and maybe experiences from other countries, I would like to ask Monica to join the floor. Grazia, Tech and Oliver, and I will have some questions for you. So, Monica, let me start from you because there is an interesting point. I mean, Brazil is obviously investing very much on agroecology. They have a dedicated policy. They are talking about the importance of indigenous knowledge, traditional knowledge, and I would like, though, there is one thing that, and we all seem to agree, food system needs transformation, all the damages that Oliver mentioned about, but how is agroecology really addressing your need as an indigenous woman and in general of the indigenous people?
Thank you so much for having me. As you know, my name is Monica Yator. I'm a feminist and very passionate about food rights, especially coming from a community where food is a basic need, especially, and the 80% of food producers are women. To me, that touches the middle of my heart because without food, there would be a lot of violence in the society, especially at household level. Growing up as a pastoralist community where livestock belongs to the man, and chicken and the rest of the farm produce belongs to the woman. So you see, women are still struggling, especially with the economy. So again, for me, agroecology is that's a solution. It is gender equality first, and also it feeds the nation. Even everybody else here must eat first. So food transition to me is number one. Before we talk about climate action, we need to talk about first the SDG 1, SDG 2, and also SDG 5. And then we come to now the climate now platform that we are here now talking about that. So I agree with my brother, the video there. So currently as we speak, traditional knowledge is very key. And I come from an agro-pastoralist community where my mother used to have a farm and also livestock. So stock manure to put in the farms. So, and my mother used to have a seed bank, the natural indigenous way of storing the seeds, so that when the rains come and when there is a season for planting, the seeds is ready. So agroecology reduces the cost of food production first, and also it reduces the time these women use to go to the markets and they go buy seeds, they don't even know where they come from. So when you use your seeds that you have saved, you're guaranteed of 100% growth and germination. So that reduces, again, the burden of food insecurity among households. We can share more. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe I think that these are really great insights, and being one that contributed to build probably around 20 seed banks, really passionate about that. Can you maybe tell us a little bit where you are from? And we heard also from from Brazil experience. Do you think that your country, Kenya, has a similar debate around the need to really have policies that are enabling agroecology?
Yes, at the moment we don't have a standalone policy in support of agroecology, regenerative agriculture, though me and other activists around food security are working hard. Currently we have a policy in Kirinyaga County, and together with the PELAM, IFSFA, we are rolling out awareness creation for our communities first to understand that food production should be individual rights, so that we are not bombarded by these corporate communities that are bringing seeds that we don't know. We recently had an issue in my county where there was maize plantation in precarious irrigation scheme, and 3,000 farmers complained because there was no germination. So who do you blame? Because you are being brought seeds and you plant and you are not given a guarantee of any growth, and you are not given a license or even an insurance. If they don't grow, they will be paid. So again, we need to reduce the influence of the multinational corporation to our farmers, and also we need to give farmers power to produce their own food, power to control what they can eat, and power to grow their own food. Yes, we have policies, and our agriculture policies at the moment is not speaking about regenerative agriculture, but thank you to the movement building and people consciousness of what they eat, and also farmers are very conscious of what they produce. So we are going back to a traditional way of farming, and that is agroecology, and we are telling farmers to have their own seeds, have your own seed banks. And even agroecology talks about tree planting. So we need to reduce the women time and energy going to fetch firewood. And also soil carbon, we need to take care of the soil as well. So we teach pastoralist community to also conserve water, because water, again, must be there for us to produce food sustainably. Yes.
Thank you. This is really very insightful. Now let's change continent and let's move to India. Grazia, I think in India there is a big movement around natural agriculture and the laws that are supportive of this approach. At the same time, India is also one of the main country of the Green Revolution. Professor Swaminathan, who then became almost a champion for agroecology or more sustainable approach, who recently passed away. But once again, there is a need, so you have very contrasting model, and you need to have evidence to understand where are the trade-off and how to advance. So from your organization perspective, what is the kind of knowledge that really matters to you to decide which way you want to farm?
Thank you so much, Carlo, and a very good afternoon to everyone who's joined in. Answering to your question, our institution has delved in indigenous people's food systems that are rooted in centuries of accumulated wisdoms guided by the values of caring and sharing that has nurtured our harmonious relationship with nature. We see that these systems have critical insights that can contribute to transitioning to a more nature-positive food systems. While there are evidence to support this, there is a critical need for to convey and to integrate this into a form that would be scientifically acceptable, that it can be acknowledged by mainstream thinkers and policymakers. The Indigenous Partnership, or TIP, its initiative with the support of the Rockefeller Foundation, we aimed to provide these internationally accepted evidence that would demonstrate that Indigenous people food system do produce agroecological outcomes that can provide a template of solutions to build the climate resilience. So what we did was we looked at tools such as the FAO tools for assessment or evaluation of agroecological performance, or TAPE in short, that assess agroecosystem based on the 10 principles of agroecology. However, it was apparent that the tool was not fully able to encapsulate the perspective of the Indigenous communities, and modification has been made to the tool to make it more comprehensive representation of our food systems. And currently we are using the IP version of this tool across 5 countries, assessing the food system of Indigenous peoples like the Karen in Thailand, the Mayan in Mexico, the Khasi, the Karbi, and the Garo of Northeast India, and the Ojek communities of Kenya. What we saw was this was also an opportunity for us to build the capacity of community members, especially the Indigenous youth, and the participation of the elders and the women in particular provided a more holistic understanding of the intricate relationship within these systems. Our preliminary findings was really interesting, as it shows that many of our Indigenous food systems align with the agroecology principles in terms such as diversity, resilience, efficiencies, culture, human and social values, and many more, scoring above 70%. However, it is also essential to note that the lower scores that we see in other aspects does not really mean that the system is non-functional, but it underscores there's a limitation in the tools that was not able to capture the richness in our food systems. And as Indigenous communities, our knowledge, our belief system, our thinking is ingrained within the stories that guide our practices. Thus, storytelling becomes a very powerful tool that is enabling us to understand the deeper and the higher aspect of these findings. However, the very system that we are trying to defend and promote is faced with a lot of challenges. And this is putting us in a state of vulnerabilities. As we look at the system, we see that experiences have shown that science alone cannot be enough to improve or regenerate the food system. And traditional knowledge, the values, and the governance systems are essential and critical to this. Therefore, there is a pressing need that we develop a framework where science and traditional knowledge system can work as a co-game line, and co-creation, I would say, is the name of that game. And we also noted that the TAPE methodology we were using was aligning in most counts with the 10 principles that was listed by the outcome framework of Region 10 that was launched a few days ago. And we are looking forward on how we can test these frameworks into our systems as well. We in NSFAS, along with TIP particularly, and its partners, are really committed to collaborate, to co-create these community-led initiatives, and backed by science for the regeneration of the food systems that we are in. Many organizations, including NSFAS, are fostering this co-creation on the ground. platforms such as the agroecology learning circles is becoming a pivotal space that is fostering exchange of knowledge, peer learning, intergenerational knowledge transfer, and also co-learning for the promotion of innovation. This also includes linking agrobiodiversity, such as the inclusion of wild edibles in school meals, and also supporting the biocentric and biocultural approaches in restoration of landscape by the indigenous people. Unfortunately, many adaptations such as these are confined to only specific areas, and their scalability is dependent on their access to resources and inclusive opportunity. Therefore, there's a need to ensure that indigenous people have the access to financial resources, but also co-creating a landscape for this co-creation process to happen. And I would say that indigenous communities and organizations must be supported to play this role.
Thank you. Really, really fascinating. And maybe just one short follow-up question. Is your tip framework available for others to use?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think that gives us a little bit, it's a very good introduction from the two women who spoke before. And maybe now let's turn a little bit to the scientific perspective on that. We heard that for them it's really important, the storytelling, the narrative, the values, the use of traditional knowledge, traditional biodiversity. How, from a scientific point of view, what kind of evidence are important and needed to actually convince the policymakers, the investors, the funders? They make a big pledge. They need money to be supporting those systems. What kind of evidence are needed to convince investors and policymakers to fund this transition, agroecology, and other regenerative approaches?
Thanks, Carlo, and kudos to the two champions in the panel, two ladies. That I totally agree on what you are saying. That everything that we do in the community has to be built based on the local knowledge, based on the indigenous knowledge, and based on what people are doing over the generation, because that has a knowledge and science carried over from generation to generation. And when it comes to, the slogan of the COP was "with science we can do," but I think today we are at the end of the COP, at this pavilion at least, and we need to change that slogan into like co-creating by mixing cutting-edge science with the local knowledge, with the traditional knowledge we can do. I totally agree with what previous panelists had said. Now, what kind of evidence that we need to produce is, I would say that now we need to invest more on the data infrastructure. So, as I said in my presentation, that there are a lot of technology and ecological approaches that has been already tested and validated, in fact. So we don't need to kind of reinvent those things again and again in different places. We don't have to invest a lot of things there. We can always bring those knowledge, and for that we need a data infrastructure. And we need to harness, now with the digitization, we need to harness the capability of decision support tool, ICTs, and technologies in order to use those knowledge and then co-create with the local community using the local knowledge and local food system, local stressors that food producers or consumers are suffering from. And then we need to use those data along with data coming from other regions to kind of develop a knowledge product to communicate to the policymakers. And what kind of evidences we need? I think we need to agree upon and harmonize what are the matrices of evaluating any regenerative technology or any approaches, for example. When we say climate smart approaches, what are the indicators for that? And how do we harmonize that across the food system, across the production system, across the region, for example? So what are the indicators of food security and food sovereignty? What are the indicators of climate adaptation of the food system? What kind of food system we call climate resilient? And what are the indicators of climate climate mitigation, for example, and what kind of food system we really say that decarbonized food system. We need to agree upon that, and based on that, given that one indicator, in some production system, adaptation could be the major priority, whereas in other production system, it could be mitigation, or it could be both. Or in some smallholder production system, for example, it is more of food security and adapting to the stress, less on mitigation, but mitigation as co-benefit. So it can be also, one is identifying and agreeing upon the indicators and developing that indicator. Another is, working with the community to give the weightage on those indicators, for example. So what is more important for their context? And then evaluating any technologies, any approaches, any systems based on those indicators, and then communicating that with the policymakers, and so that policymakers can make informed decision commensurate with their food production, economic development, or food security goal and environmental goal, for example. So I would say that we need to invest more on data, more on knowledge sharing, more on building a data infrastructure, and then sharing that within a fair principle, so that anybody from any part of the world can access those data, access the knowledge product that has been generated by using this public money, so that even the technology was not developed and invented at certain level, they can also benefit from the technology that has been developed elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe a very quick follow-up question. Just give me, Grazia referred to the Region 10 protocol, which is outcome-based, and which really, so basically it makes the implementation, the specific technology is not so relevant because they're locally specific. And so do you see that as a good way forward, having this outcome-based approach, so setting those indicators at the outcome level, and then let the community, the local approach to be implemented?
Totally agree. Totally agree. That's why, I think it's just the naming different, kind of nomenclature difference. Otherwise, the approach is same, I would say. For example, when you say learning environment or hub approach, it's basically sitting with the community, working with the community, identifying what their priorities are, what is the existing food system, what are the production resources that are at their disposal, what are the stresses that they are experiencing, and then what should be the desirable outcome. And based on that, you co-create those things, as Gracia and Monica said, that based on what their priorities are, what they want to, for example, achieve, what they want to see their food sovereign system going forward, and based on that you co-create and prioritize the activities. So all our hub approach, or what we also call is learning landscape, is you kind of co-create that in a learning platform, and then generate the evidence from there, and then take it from it's kind of when we say hub, it is just like you have seen all these bicycles where there's a hub and then it spokes spreading all across. So you generate the knowledge at certain level, and then you kind of scale out to all the agroecological conditions that mimic or that are representative of that hub, and keep on kind of repeating that process again and again, so that it goes it kind of escalate in a exponential way.
Thank you. Oliver, I think you heard a lot. You heard the farmer perspective, you heard the research side, and you are leading a platform that has, I think, around 50 countries member, around 500 organizations members. And so you obviously you have a very huge potential to really bring that at the kind of global level, influencing the narrative around this. So from your point of view, what is that you need as a platform lead to really push and bring the agenda for agroecology and regenerative agriculture to where it needs to be? Because it's not just a matter of doing it, it's a matter of doing it fast, because we don't have really much time to act now.
It's a matter of time, but it's also a matter of process. I think an output is a process, and a process is an output in itself. We cannot dance faster than the music. I think it's really important to, while being mindful of the urgency and immediacy of responding, we also need to be mindful of how we do things. And I think this is important, especially when we try to bring in people at the grassroots, the frontline actors, because they don't necessarily run as fast as the private sector. They don't necessarily run as fast as international and big NGOs. They're not necessarily run as fast as research institutions and universities in the North. So I think while being mindful of doing things fast, we should really be mindful of how we do things together, right? And I wanted to emphasize that point. The second one is just going back to the issue around evidence. I mean, it also depends on who asked the question. So who asked the question also defines the answer, right? But I think it's important to be mindful of that. And another thing I think to be able to move fast and all together, I think three things are really key. One, and you have already mentioned it all in terms of evidence, we need to really put together, get all the evidence that we could get. But evidence should not also, or the lack of scientifically and formally accepted evidence hinder us from pushing that agenda together. Otherwise, the lack of what is formally accepted evidence can be used against us. That, okay, there's not much evidence, and so what do? You haven't proven it, and therefore we should not, use it. But I think the fact that, and if we go back to the conversation on indigenous peoples, indigenous food systems, they have survived centuries and centuries and centuries, and they're still here, right? And so that itself is enough evidence to show that what is agroecological, what is regenerative, as long as it's grounded on local realities, on that set of principles, is enough an evidence to use. Second is to use all these evidence in our efforts to push for increased investments in agroecology and regenerative approaches and deep regenerative approaches. We all know that agroecology is really gaining traction. It's high in the agenda. But what we feel is that the level of funding that goes to agroecology and sustainable agricultural practices is not commensurate to the level of recognition it deserves and the level of the recognition that it currently enjoys. So most of it probably is lip service. So even if a big institution launches a 100 million initiative on agroecology, for instance, if we probably need to go deeper and say what percentage of that budget of that institution is represented by that 100 million. At face value, maybe it's huge, but if it's just 1% of their overall budget, it hardly makes a dent, right? So is it really a big shift towards the direction that we want to see? Or it's just a matter of PR to show that we have big initiatives on agroecology, but then, 99% of their investments go the other way around. So I think we really need to be critical of that and not necessarily be persuaded by figures as such. And we really need to see the proportion of that. The third one is policy. Use the same set of evidence and cases that we have to lobby and push for increased political commitment towards agroecological transformation, right? That's why it's really important for us, for agroecology movement, for sustainable agriculture, for indigenous people, for farmers organizations, for farmers movement, to be present in big discussions such as here, in COP on climate, but not to isolate it as if it's different from the conversations that we're having next year on COP on biodiversity, on COP on desertification, in the conversations that we're having within the CFS, or in the Food System Summit, or in the nutrition conversations, or in the fossil fuel conversations. I think it's really important to amplify the connection and interconnectedness of all of these things. So I think knowledge, finance, and policy are really important to make sure that we're advancing towards the direction that we want to see.
Thank you. And I'll ask you a follow-up question, but you need to promise me to answer quickly because the question is very complicated and you could speak 2 hours about it. But you mentioned the 100 million that would look like, but we all know that there are $700 billion in subsidies towards agriculture, the majority of which goes into unsustainable practices, to make it short, maybe around 95, 93%. How do you see the platform to play a role in terms of changing the destination of this huge amount of money towards more agroecology?
Exactly. Number one, we need to track where funding is going, right? We need to have a tool that will be able to capture where is the direction of finance. And within the coalition, together with some experts, we've developed a financial tracking tool on agroecology. It may not be perfect, but this type of tool allows you to see, using the 13 principles, in what direction of travel is funding going. And we really need to make sure that donors, both public and private, are using that tool to allow us to measure where is the direction, where is the shift in financing is going. That's one. The second is to work with others who are doing on these issues. You have a coalition on public development banks. You have a coalition which is looking at repurposing agricultural subsidies. And there are many other institutions and groups who are working on these directions. We need to work with them and partner with them and use the tools that they are developing and feed what we have into that process to make sure that we're able to connect the dots together. So we cannot do things in isolation. We really need to see who are the experts on this field and connect and make sure that we are all, addressing things all together head on.
Thank you very much. So this is the end of the COP. I would like to ask each of you 30 seconds. Are you satisfied? Are we going in the right direction? Is the COP really leading towards agroecology? What is your take-home message from this COP?
I am not satisfied. I'm 50-50 because I'm still not convinced enough because my president didn't sign the agriculture policy. And I think the guy is focusing so much in carbon and forgetting that food comes first. So we are looking at long-term benefits and also not focusing on the livelihoods, the peasant farmer who is producing what we eat. And I'm very sure he's very focused on organic food because most of them, they live in high-end places. And Carrefour supermarket now is having an organic shelves, and most of the rich people go there to buy food. So again, it needs to tone down and talk about agriculture.
Thank you.
I feel like I would share the same sentiments because when we started, we said food system was on the top, and then there was a lot of confusions on where it stands. And then now also, we are still waiting for yet a final call of where it would be put at. But nonetheless, we move forward from here. And I think to progress, the progress that we need to make as an essential step beyond our comfort zone. We will be faced with several of such situations in the future as well. But what is needed is to unlearn the ingrained thought process and bravely shift our mindset. It was put up in the last sessions that we have attended that the main hurdle of this all is the hurdle highlighted in recent session of how, because of the mindset of the existing system, is that they're not being able to see beyond of how do we connect the dots, as Oliver has said. And I think creating that landscape, as I said, of this co-creation would help in amplifying the many evidences that we have of the impact these practices exist in terms of climate action. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
We could always see the glass half full or half empty, but I choose to look at it as half full. I have 11-year-old son, and I could do everything in my power to be able to make sure that the future he has is bright, right? And I think we may not be very positive about it, but I think this is not time to lose hope. That's the only power and the only instrument we have to make sure that we're going beyond 1.5.
Thank you. I also have a son of 11 years old. That's really unites us, and that's a very strong motivation to keep doing that.
I'll just use 20 seconds, so I'll give you back 10 seconds there. So I think I'm happy because food system, for the first time, food system was in the top agenda that way. But as Oliver also said that this recognition should also be coming with a commensurate level of funding, which is not the case as of now, but let's see if it comes with the funding.
Thank you. I don't know if there is a very quick question for the audience, from the audience. Let's see. Yes, please.
May I comment instead of a question? Thank you. Francisco Rosado May from the Universidad Intercultural Maya de Quintana Roo and the Indigenous Partnership. It was in 2009 when Wessel came up with the study to determine the three elements that Oliver mentioned: action, science, and practice. And as I understand, the idea was not to define agroecology based on those three components. Just to show the elements that agroecology is working on. I may be wrong, but that's the interpretation I have. Because a few years later, Wessel and et al. Published a paper in which said the traditional agriculture is not agroecology. Because it's only practice, doesn't have science, doesn't have movement. So maybe that kind of papers are setting back the path to move for co-creation of knowledge. Just to comment. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. And it's a very good comment, though, because it goes a little bit what Oliver said. Who asked the question also lead the discussion. No? So if you say don't take traditional knowledge, then obviously you are excluding a big part of the constituencies. That leads us to the end. For me, is also the end of the COP. It has been a very good experience. I think the comments and the inputs provided by the panel were a very good way to close. We touch upon the different dimension, the policy dimension, the farmers, indigenous people dimension, the research dimension. I would like, if you allow me to also express my view on the COP. I think it aligns very well with what Oliver said. Processes and progresses takes time, and we started 2 years ago in Glasgow to have food a little bit more relevant into COP. Last year there was a step forward, and this year there was another step forward, because having a declaration on agriculture on day one of the COP, I think it is a step forward. There are disappointments, but I think next COP, and surely the COP in Brazil, with this current government, will be, I think, the place where there will be the big leap forward. So I'm also optimistic. It's half full, and yeah, we need to keep going for our sons, our children. Thank you.